Hi, everybody, and happy Bisexual Visibility Day. My name is Sarah. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm a proud queer trans woman of color. To be more precise, I'm bi plus and I identify as bi plus. So happy Bisexual Visibility Day, and welcome to the Bi Plus Awareness Panel. Today, this event is going to be our third annual. So this is our third time doing this for Silicon Valley Pride. And other partner organizations that have jumped in include the Office of LGBTQ Affairs and Billy DeFrank Center, along with us at Silicon Valley Pride. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. And first off, I really want to acknowledge everything that's going on in the world right now in regards to the verdict with Breonna Taylor. In regards to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's memorial service today, there's a lot of heavy stuff that's going on. We at Silicon Valley Pride, and I could probably speak for a majority of other groups, we're here for that level of support. And we stand in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. We also acknowledge everything that's going on. And we want to make sure that we create spaces for ensuring that your voices are heard. But at the same time, we also want to celebrate Bi Visibility Day. And what better way to bring community leaders here in the South Bay to celebrate that? Bi Visibility Day is observed annually every September 23rd to recognize, celebrate bisexual people, the bisexual community, and the history of bisexuality. On the back end, we also have Saldi Surabin of Silicon Valley Pride doing the production. You could catch this on YouTube and on Facebook. And Luis is on the other back end. If you want to check us out on television, you could actually do so at Comcast Channel 30. But let's get into it. Bisexual Awareness Day, Visibility Day. First up, I want to introduce some of our panelists. So first up, we have Jarvis Subia, born and raised in San Jose's Seven Trees neighborhood, Bay Area spoken word poet. Jarvis Subia is a queer Latinx flower-loving millennial devoted to performing poems from his heart to yours. The 2019 Poetry Foundation and Crescendo Literary Incubator Fellow, the recipient of the 2019 Silicon Valley Creates and Content Magazine's Emerging Artist Award, and 2019 Multicultural Artist Leadership Institute Fellow, San Jose Poetry Slam's 2018 Grand Slam champion, and has competed in 14 national and regional poetry slams. Geez, Jarvis, we are in celebration of your greatness. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Welcome Jarvis to the stage. Up next, we have Richard Mehlinger. So Richard is an out and proud bi man who has called Sunnyvale his home for the past 9 years. He is the chair of Sunnyvale's Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, chair of Livable Sunnyvale, and a local pro-housing, pro-transit advocacy organization, and founder of Fabulous Sunnyvale, a local LGBTQ organization. To his knowledge, he's the first person in Sunnyvale history to give a public comment before City Council in a hot tub. Everybody, cheers to Richard Mehlinger. Welcome. Up next, we have Theresa Enghardt. I hope I'm saying that right, Theresa. But Theresa is a bisexual, bi-furious activist who moved to the South Bay from Berlin, Germany in March 2020. Again, I want to say that, March 2020. They use she, her, or they, them pronouns. They care about fighting oppression in all its forms, resisting queer assimilation and gatekeeping, and embracing all identities and experiences under the bi, pan, plus umbrella in all its wonderful complexity and fluidity. Everybody, welcome Theresa. And last but not least, we have Cynthia in Public. Cynthia in Public is a San Jose-based comic and producer. Presently, Cynthia is the CEO overlord of Bang Group Productions, an online Comedy Central that centers BIPOC women, differently abled and LGBTQ plus people that are often marginalized in comedy. The company boasts the longest running online Bay Area comedy show, Comedians and Community and CYNTHIA, CCC show, that has raised over 1,000 for local Bay Area BLM charities in their free time in public. Is a proud emotional support human to her cat Samson. Samson. And you can follow them on CYNTHIA in Public at CYNTHIA in Public on IG and on Facebook, and at Bang Productions. Welcome to the stage, Cynthia. It looks like everyone's ready. Everyone has their drinks, at least a couple of us. So let's get it started. Folks, happy Bi Visibility Day. It's such an honor to be with each and every one of you here today, this evening, celebrating with us at Silicon Valley Pride, Office of LGBTQ Affairs, and Billy DeFrank Center. So I just want to get into it. And what does Bi Visibility Day mean to each of you folks? So what does Bi, when we say Bi Visibility Day, when we think about September 23rd, what does that mean to you? I'm going to pick on folks. I'm going to say Richard, because Richard was your second time at Bi Visibility Day.
All right.
Let's get us started. Go ahead, Richard.
So what does Bi Visibility Day mean to me? So my experience as a bi man is that if I am not very, very consciously trying not to pass as straight, I pass as straight. And part of that is because I'm relatively masculine performing, but part of that is because of the general invisibility that bi people face, and especially bi men face this idea that we don't actually exist. And so Bi Visibility Day to me is about, showing the world that actually we're here, we're queer, we're not going anywhere, and that our identities are valid and legitimate. And that to me is very important. Plus, and that you can't overemphasize the importance of this, it's an opportunity to dress up a bit and go on panels with fabulous folks like Sera and the rest of this panel. So that's what Bi Visibility Day means to me.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Can I jump in, Sera?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, for me, to be honest, I didn't even know we had a day until I got invited to this panel.
And this is why we need it.
I know, right? We definitely need to buy. Let's just take a whole week. Let's not just take a day. Let's just take the whole week.
It is a week. So it is.
Okay, cool. We have a week. Yeah. I'm learning so much from this panel already. Y'all are doing great. No, I think to echo what Richard said, I think it's important to show that we are here, because often in the LGBTQ plus community, we're seen as either the bad bee in LGBTQ plus, or we're just not seen at all, right? We're just sort of lumped in with straight people, and then straight people just kind of like, oh, you're just straight. You're just like, no, I like both, everything, and it's just, I think it's nice that we acknowledge our own sexuality and our own orientation, right, in a way that oftentimes is swept under the shadow in pretty much every interaction that we have.
Yeah, I would like to add that I see this Bi Visibility Day as an opportunity to celebrate our BiPAN plus community, and also send out a signal to people who are not connected yet to our community, but maybe they want to be. And it's especially important right now in terms of in times of social isolation and all that.
Yeah, I would say Bi Visibility for me is the more I see bi-centered celebrations going on, the more it helps remind me that we as a larger society are starting to understand how sexuality works, and how there's not necessarily a binary to it, or that we're only attracted to people of either the opposite of the way we present or the similar to the way we present. And actually, there's a lot of flexibility inside of that. It's kind of this conversation I've had with myself for as long as I've had sexuality, and it makes me really happy to see that as a larger community, we're now engaging in this dialogue of what does sexuality look like, and that it can be more expansive than we think it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like some of the things that you folks brought up in terms of bisexuality being swept under the rug and needing kind of like the space for bi folks to be able to come together and share stories and probably meet community. I remember going to a conference around 2 years ago. It was Out and Equal. And throughout the conference, every day there was something regarding bi erasure. And I don't know if you folks are familiar with that terminology, but the terms like swept under the rug, or folks not believing that you're bi, just believing that you're straight, or you're just like curious right now, like bi curious. I know that's a term that gets thrown out there too. And talking about bi erasure, how's the acceptance of bi folks been within the past couple of years? Have you folks been seeing an increase in terms of greater visibility within community? Are days like this really necessary to be able to get the bi community out there? Or has there been a lot more acceptance with your own personal lived experience?
Well, I would say that especially mainstream society is still really, really heteronormative and also binary. So first they assume you're straight, and then, oh, maybe you're not. Okay, then maybe you're gay. And then that's where it ends for most people. And then bi is seen as this really special, like, exception, maybe complicated. And I mean, it doesn't have to be. We're like 40% of the LGBT plus community, according to some numbers. Of course, there's different numbers, but yeah, so basically I still have this experience of being like the exception, and then kind of feeling like, okay, so they clearly didn't think about people like me. And it's not necessarily hostile all the time. Erasure doesn't need to be like actively like hostile. It can just be like ignorance, like people just not thinking about it, people not being educated about it. And this stuff should be taught in school, right? And such,
Absolutely.
But it's not.
Controversial statement here.
I mean, I'm speaking from my German experience. I'm not entirely sure about all the like US context.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't taught in school when I was in school. But I mean, I'm hearing like a lot of schools are trying to include that into the new curriculum, especially in California. But I don't know how widespread that is. It's more just like I hear like little news here and there. But I do think that it's important to talk about. I mean, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. What was the original question again, Sarah? I know I had a great answer to it.
How has the acceptance of bi folks been within the past couple of years?
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes. I would say it's definitely changed a lot since I've been in middle school and high school to now. I mean, I remember even in high school, it was people were just trying to understand the concept, and like the acceptance was starting, right? Nowadays, I think people are more accepting of non-heteronormative relationships, but at the same time, they still look at it through a heteronormative lens, right? So they'll look at you as, oh yeah, you're a bisexual person, but like, even if you're with a man and a woman, then it's like, oh, then you're just like a normal straight couple. You're automatically a straight couple, right? Or if it's a woman and a woman, like, oh, you're automatically a lesbian couple, but there's also has to be a man in the relationship, right? So I would say it's still generally accepted, but I think that it's to Richard's point, it's different for men and for women. Like women are allowed more fluidity and expression in our sexuality, mostly because female sexuality isn't seen as a it's not seen as aggressive or like offensive, but like male sexuality is just like, no, you gotta choose. I can't handle if you might think that I'm cute a little bit. And I'm like, it doesn't work that you're not cute. Like, I don't think you know, I think my favorite thing to say is that the only people on Tinder that really like bi people are straight couples on Tinder.
Oh God.
Mostly because there's still a lot of stereotypes that bi people you know, we love to sleep around, or that we can't choose, so we choose everyone, when really being a bi person is the same as being a straight person or being a homosexual person. It's just, you know, how you choose your life is up to you, you know.
To echo off that, the smart aleck response I always have is, bi men aren't allowed to exist. Bi women are only allowed to exist for straight men. So, yeah, and I think there has been some improvement, at least locally, in the past few years. You've got Santa Clara County LGBT Affairs Office doing the bi pride flag raising. They did it today, albeit without the usual celebration. And they've been doing that for a few years. There's panels like this that are happening. So there is some improvement locally. And I think there's also a generational shift. You know, the Zoomers seem to get it. Millennials generally seem to kind of understand it. And then you start talking to, and I am generalizing, obviously, you start talking to the older crowd, and even within the LGBTQ community, and you start getting lots of very clueless remarks. You know, it seems like most of the older lesbians I've met have some story about a bi woman leaving them for a man, and therefore, like, okay. Like, I get that this happens, but it doesn't invalidate the entire identity.
Yeah, I think I really love that what you're talking about. Like, there is also a generational difference in the LGBTQ plus community in terms of how gender norms are seen, and how, you know, even things like bisexuality is seen. Like, I mean, across the board, we could say generally it's not seen as favorably, but like, even when you look to older members in the community, things like, you know, a non-binary person or a gender fluid person, they're just like, what? Like, you know, like, can you just be like a stud, or like, can you just be this or that? It's like, well, I can be a stud in this, and like there, you know, it's like, it's constantly evolving. Even I'm still doing a lot of learning, and I have a lot of growth to do. But there is sort of that divide. And then when you go outside of that community, I think it's like we're basically at the start of, you know, kind of rewiring the general population's brain around this. But it's going to take a lot of time.
Okay, but
prior to contrary, sorry to cut you off, but prior to contrary belief, there are boomers in the queer community.
There are.
They're also
Yeah.
people have trouble grasping these things. Go ahead, Theresa.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say the same thing. Like, I also want to appreciate that there has been a bi movement since the 70s, I believe. And
yes,
there's a lot of awesome older people in the bi community, but also I have actually had good experiences even with like older lesbian women who have been pretty accepting. I mean, sometimes they weren't thinking about bi at first, and then I join, and then they're like, oh yeah, cool, welcome.
Also, if I can circle back real quick, so I didn't get a chance to chime in. But for myself, bisexuality coming from what I always consider myself growing up in a very cis, hyper-masculine culture, growing up as a male who was intended to be very masculine and male, playing sports and all the things that come with that, and always having to kind of negotiate what sexuality means to me growing up. Also, being in this binary of like, either you have to be straight or you have to be gay. There's no in between. And so that process made my coming out a lot harder and more rigorous than it should have been, because I was always in my head having to pick one or the other, not knowing that I could find a middle ground. not knowing that actually my sexuality is more expansive. And it took me to find community and find people with the language and folks who were able to kind of school me up on, you know, what your love could look like, for me to actually be okay with coming out into like bi awareness. So it wasn't like it took a few years for me to actually be able to claim bisexuality as is bi. And even still to this day, I tell people I'm queer, because then it just opens up like, what do you mean? So for me being pansexual, it opens up like, what do you mean? What is that? Like, you know, it's not a lot more people. That's harder to attach to than bi awareness. And so I'm just like, let's not get into it. Just know that I'm queer and that, you know, that's it's what it is.
Yeah, and I love how you bring up the fluidity, because like last year I identified it as pan. This year I'm identifying as bi plus, but I'm like bordering demisexual, and I'm almost even an ace at this point. But there are a lot of terminologies that's thrown around there. So there's bisexual, right? There's bi plus, which I like. For me, bi plus just resonates with me in terms of my own sexual identity. Then there's pansexual, there's queer. There's all these fluid definitions in terms of explaining sexual orientation. What is there any difference between all these, or is there some sort of unifying thread with all these sexual orientations? What are some ways you folks could think about, you know, fostering like greater unity with all these identities? If there is a way to foster like, you know, more unity within the bisexual community.
I would say it's understanding that there is a lot of space in between. I really love the conversation as like spectrum dialogue, and how we can understand that there aren't these boxes that we put things in. And every time I think of spectrum, I think of that color wheel on Windows, where you can like slide it over a little bit, and you're in the red, or you're in the red kind of yellow, or the red kind of yellow less is or more, you know. And so I always think of it as like, yeah, you can be bisexual. You can be bisexual who favors one or the other. You could be sometimes and sometimes not. It's up to you. As I tell many men on Grindr, you could totally be straight and be with me. You know, like it's really up to the way you identify and the way you show up in your sexuality. And I think the more we try to kind of move into that, we're just realizing that it's all attraction and love. But I also don't want to erase folks' experiences, stories by saying that.
Ooh, Jarvis, you just brought up a whole other bucket of stuff with straight men. Men that identify as straight but have sexual relations. Yeah, it's yeah, I'm not gonna go into that because that's not my lived experience. I have read quite a bit on that now. But I think I do agree, because I think the definitions are changing, then the words are expanding. But like the way that I traditionally learned it was like bisexual was primarily for cis. Like if you're bisexual, you're within the binary of male, female, but cisgendered. And then if you're pansexual, male, female, non-binary, pretty much anyone, whether they're cis or transgender. And I was like, okay, I'm closer to pansexual. But then at some point, I think bisexual kind of expanded its definition to overlap with pansexual. So at this point, I just go with bi because it's easy for people to know, but I'm more likely identify as queer oftentimes. And I'm just tired. Like I just pick one that like is easy for other people, and then I know what I am. So I don't really care what I call myself, but I know for other people, bi is easy. But then if I go into conversation about it, it's just going to turn into 10-minute dissertation. So I think that we shouldn't stick too much to the labels, because there is some overlap between. And I think we could actually use that and leverage that to build solidarity within the community.
Oh dear, we seem to have lost Theresa.
Oh no.
So I've got, I swear, I think there should be like a continuing education requirement for being in the LGBT community at this point.
Like you get a new cert every 4 months.
You get a new cert every year. Okay, can I share my screen because I have a couple of helpful memes, one of which I made and one of which I didn't. Okay, so screen sharing is easiest with 2 monitors. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is one that I came across a while ago, which I think kind of gets to like a lot of these words, okay. So I can give you like the technical difference. Okay, bisexual is attracted to same and other genders. Pansexual is attracted to all genders, sort of without regard to gender identity. Omnisexual is attracted to all genders, but gender identity influences it. And polysexual is more than one gender. But like ultimately, this is why bi plus is useful. Yes, these distinctions mattered. These distinctions are fairly narrow, but they do matter to people, and that's great. And if it helps people come to term with their identities, that's great. But that's why terms like bi plus and queer are helpful for, as Jarvis, I think, was the one saying, if we don't want to do a 10-minute dissertation on, was it Jarvis or Cynthia? Sorry.
It's all good. I like being mistaken for Jarvis. He got a cool mustache.
It's a great mustache. And then the other one I made was this, which is, I think some of these distinctions get overhyped. Like, there's the differences between like bi and pan, and I'm going to stop screen sharing now. Like, bi and pan and all the others are really pretty narrow, right? And a lot of it has to do with just like what word you feel fits you better. So that's sort of where I fall on it. Bi is the term that best fits my experience, but it's like the distinctions are so fine. Yeah.
Yeah,
I appreciate celebrating like Pansexual Visibility Day in May, Bisexual Visibility Day in September, and Trans Visibility Day in March. So I have a lot of days to celebrate.
Yes.
Year round. Did you say something?
Yeah,
I was just illustrating the days of the year. I'm sorry, ignore me, please.
All good.
No,
I think there's so there's a lot of intersectionality within like sexual orientation, and obviously I look at this panel right over here, and there's a lot of intersecting identities that a lot of us hold with us. In terms of personal intersecting identities, how has intersectionality played a role with being bi while also experiencing other forms of discrimination or oppression? Has being bi and being, it looks like Cynthia's ready to. Cynthia, go ahead.
Black woman who is bisexual and gender fluid. And that's the order of like racism, sexism, homophobia, or however you want to call it. And then I don't even get to the gender fluid part most of the time because I'm still caught on the first 2 parts. That's my life, right? I'm sorry to say this, but for the most part, my bisexual identity does not come out because there's a lot of other. I will not curse, but there's a lot of other things in my life that like when they see this black face, that's what they deal with first. And then they figure out because most of the time I'm like not in a way that I dress in a straight passing way or like a cool, edgy kind of way that like they can't really tell or people can't really tell. So I think especially in the last few months when George Floyd passed away and then Breonna Taylor and then I think, Tony McDade and then Ahmaud Arbery and then like the names just kind of go on, right? it was a time where like it was just a collective grieving moment. Every single Black person that I knew was in this moment, right? And it happened, and I think it bled into LGBTQ month, but like literally the entire month, I was not even, it wasn't even on my, like I made one post about it towards the end, but every day of that week was just protests and, you know, like trying to raise money or addressing it on my shows and talking about racism and trying to educate people or discussing it at work. So it's like, I won't go too much because I know I'm very long-winded and I've already talked a lot. But I think for people that are of color, like these things just compound a lot, right? And like the more that you have, like say I was a trans woman, say I was lesbian, and I didn't have the privilege of being bisexual, where maybe I could be in a straight passing relationship, like, you know, say those things, it gets even harder to go through life, and it through the criminal justice system, through job interviews, through just every day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for sharing. I know, Theresa, you were talking a little bit about intersectionality. You want to go ahead and talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, we already mentioned some aspects on like what is being bi look like for different genders, and I think there is some intersection with like gender-based oppression. So, for example, as I think Richard also mentioned before, bi women are kind of objectified and not seen as like their own, like, oh, like she's bi, that's what she's into, and she's doing these things for her own pleasure. But instead, bi women are often made like the object of sexual fantasies, and people just assume that they can approach her in ways which she maybe didn't even indicate that she's interested in, right? And also statistically, for example, bi women experience domestic violence more often, and and such. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that I think there's also, so gender-based oppression is also, there's also oppression against non-binary people, right? And that non-binary people already break the gender binary, and then if they also break the kind of sexual orientation binary, people don't know how to sort them into their like binary schemes in their head, right? And then they are told that they don't exist in multiple different ways, and that is really isolating, and there's mental health effects.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I mean, I think I'm still on that boat because for the most part, I don't even tell people I'm gender fluid. I just go by the she, her pronoun because it's a lot easier, especially because there's already so many questions, just me being a Black woman in this world, that why have extra questions of like, oh, you're bisexual, like, oh, you're gender fluid, what is this? What is that? Like having to explain everything and all these parts of my identity is just, it's tiring enough. And then adding in these other points, I usually just sort of reveal it when I'm like, okay, I know I'm in this space where I don't have to explain myself. So like, here I am. Yeah. And then otherwise it's just more of a private affair, which isn't ideal, but it protects my psyche, my heart.
I think for myself, a lot of the way I choose to show up in the world is kind of based on my environment and where I'm at. So I'm in South San Jose. I'm born and raised in the Seven Trees neighborhood of South San Jose. So I'm from the hood, and I'm from places where the way you show up in the world dictates the way you're going to be treated in the world. And a lot of times the way I choose to present is about, especially growing up, was about my safety. It was about me needed to be tough, needed to look tough, needed to look very masculine, even though I'm having all of these internal things, because if I'm perceived as otherwise, my safety could be questioned. And so there's a lot of that negotiation also still going on, the way I was mentioning before, about how and when I choose to present my love, and also the ways I'm trying to show up in possibly a more fluid way. Like I understand that there are times and places where I choose to present more gender fluid and show up in the world that way, and I have to make sure those are places that I'm not going to have my safety questioned, right? I can't run to the liquor store, with flowers in my hair because I don't know what's going to happen. But I can go to an art show downtown in a place where I know fellow artists are going to be, and I can show up a certain way. So I think that's the same case for a lot of folks who come from a similar environment and come from places where you have to show up in a way to protect yourself, and who are still learning. Well, what else can that look like when I'm not here? One of my favorite poets he said a quote recently, and I think about it all the time. And they said, "Creativity is what happens when we're not concerned with survival." And I think how often, I guess you could say my sexual creativity, but the ways I choose to kind of investigate myself and what I want to look like when I go outside or when I show up for places like this, how much that is put up against what's going to happen when I do that. Right. And so that's my thing.
And that's awesome. Richard, yeah, I saw you were going to say something.
So to me, okay, so I'm a white dude, right? To the extent, like, and bisexual man in the Bay Area, white male bisexual in the Bay Area, I'm not catching a whole lot of crap for that. Let's be honest. But this issue of intersectionality does play a role in terms of the other things that I'm involved with, in terms of the housing activism I'm involved with in particular. And so Harvey Milk, right, the great gay pioneer, he had this speech he would do about the boy from Altoona, right? That, it used to be that if you were a queer kid growing up in some small town in the Midwest or the Rust Belt or Pennsylvania or wherever, about all you could do was kind of white knuckle it and hide and hope to fly under the radar. And that when he ran for San Francisco supervisor, when, the LGBT rights, the Pride movement, all this stuff in the infancy in San Francisco and also in New York and also in LA and so forth, that was for the boy from Altoona who could now see, I don't just have to stay here and slowly die inside. I can go to San Francisco and be who I am. Not at $3,000 for a studio, you can't. Right? And that's the thing, is that like when the quote unquote progressive accepting enclaves in the country are so expensive that working people, that queer youth, that so forth can't afford to live here, that's a social justice issue. When something like 25% of all homeless youth are queer, right? That's a social justice issue. The incredibly high rates of sexual abuse, suicide, domestic violence, homelessness, all these ills that afflict queer youth especially, that's a direct result in many ways of them not being able to find affordable, safe housing, right? How are you going to leave your abusive partner if they're covering your rent? So these sort of questions, right? Queer rights issues are not just about, gay marriage and making sure you can't be fired for being out in the workplace. It's about making sure that queer folks everywhere are able to get to places where they can live safely. That's a big part of my activism.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I know you're a big community member in Sunnyvale. And this could go out to all of you folks. In Sunnyvale, or in pretty much the South Bay, has the city that you occupy, I know a couple of us live in Campbell, a couple of us live in San Jose, and one of us lives in Sunnyvale. Has our city shown support for the bi or LGBTQ community? Has the cities that we live in showed increased support? Or do we still have to flock to San Francisco, Oakland, to just find our community? What do you folks think?
So I guess I'll start, and I'll say that it's mixed. Sunnyvale has done a lot in recent years. We started raising the LGBT pride flag last year for June. There's been a lot of, council has made a real effort to celebrate LGBT folks and LGBT voices. We had a big Pride picnic last June. We couldn't do that again this year for reasons. And so, like, yeah, there's definitely things, and a lot of the cities here, you know, they make a big point of, you know, we're going to celebrate Pride. We're going to do all this. At the same time, there's not a single gay bar between San Jose and San Francisco. And I have a couple of friends who spent a good couple years trying to get one started, and they couldn't find a landlord who would rent them a space, basically, when they found out it was a gay bar. And they called it quits and moved to Palm Springs. So, you know, like, there's definitely been a lot done to try and increase queer visibility. But there's definitely a long way to go, and a big part of the issue is making sure that we have dedicated queer spaces outside of the big cities.
Yeah. If you folks are just joining us right now, we are having a Bi Awareness Day panel with Jarvis, Richard, Cynthia, and Theresa. I have another question going back to bisexual identity. What are some of the biases you might have experienced with being bisexual, but in a heterosexual coupling or relationship? Do you find yourselves overly or similarly erased or dismissed when you're in a quote unquote straight passing relationship?
I think this was my question. Wait, I would know that. I want to hear all of y'all answer it. You guys answer. You folks.
I think I have probably the lighter of the answer because I've been very single for a long time. But I've also had to, in dating, I've had to always brush up on the question of coming what my sexuality is, particularly because I show up sometimes in a way where I don't present as such. And so I might meet a man or a woman and we go on a date and I have to, especially I think it comes up more when I'm in more of a male, what's the word I'm looking for? Binary date, male and a man and a woman kind of thing. Sorry, I'm over here. But I get more antsy in that situation because I don't know how my queerness is going to be received, maybe by a cis woman on the other end, and how that might get automatically written off as he's queer or he's not maybe mask enough for the relationship that they're looking for, right? I think the way a lot of heteronormative relationships show up in the world. And then with men, I think I sometimes get written off by queer men, not always, but sometimes do get written off of, especially early on when I was a younger queer person, of like, you're confused and you don't know what you're looking for kind of thing. And that you're like a relationship wouldn't work because you're probably still attracted to women and probably going to go over there. Now that I'm older and more set, it's easier for me to argue and justify for myself. But it is a thought process I go through when I enter into dating. What y'all got?
I have definitely had, times when I was dating a woman and she's like, but what are my parents going to think? That was fun. Like I'm not exactly subtle about being bi. Anyone who Googles me will see, right? It's on my Twitter profile. So, and like Jarvis, I don't really get the "oh, are you sure" questions anymore. But yeah, so it can present challenges, certainly.
Yeah, I've never had a dude complain about me being bisexual in a relationship. So, it's usually, but they always want to take it further and be like, "Hey, so about that threesome?" I'm just like, how about we fix us first? Yeah. For women, it's been, I think, kind of the same, where usually it's either not a problem or it is a problem because they don't trust bi women because we will leave them for a man in the end. I don't know. But I mean, it's just been some of my experiences. But I think what I was in a long-term relationship once, and I felt like it was sort of the intersection of my orientation as well as my gender identity, where I will go from very feminine to very masculine to androgynous, like, very often. But the person I was with wanted us to be very much like feminine woman, him as the manly man. So I felt like I really had to, and like, there was a lot of reasons why that relationship didn't work, but he would critique my outfits a lot to the point where I felt like I was changing myself and sort of how I presented in order to feel like I was secure and satisfied in that relationship, right? And now I don't do that anymore. Like, I'm Cynthia, take it or leave it. But back in my younger days, I wish someone had gone back and told me that, who you are is who you are, and changing your earrings or pants for someone won't make you feel any better. It'll make them feel better, which might make you feel better, but at the end of the day, it won't really make you feel better because you really wanted to wear those earrings and those pants, I don't know if that really explained it, but I think it is slightly annoying when you're meeting friends, and because you're in a heterosexual coupling, you present as heterosexual, and you're straight passing, but then you're on the outs for all like the gay jokes, and you're like, no, I'm on the in, like I want to hear, like it's a weird thing where I feel like I want to be seen for myself, regardless of the partner that I'm with. But unfortunately, I think appearances are everything, and first impressions are everything to people, so you will just get judged with whoever you show up with.
Yeah, and I would like to add that I've also felt this double erasure that I was talking about earlier with non-binary partners. So I get read as a woman, and my non-binary partner maybe gets read and misgendered as a man, and then people assume we're straight. So that's like double erasure. And then we go to a queer space, and I'm kind of self-conscious, like, are people just going to assume we're a straight cis couple, which couldn't be further from the truth. But people just assume these things by looking at others.
The question I always have, and this is for Cynthia kind of, would it be any better if you left them for a woman than if you left them for a man? Like,
I mean, with guys, they would probably feel better. This is me generalizing. I'm completely generalizing. Do not take my statement as truth. This is a disclaimer. But at least with the way that society has socialized many people, and guys in particular, the ego is stronger when you leave for a man than for a woman, because they think, oh, there's another member. I'm trying to be very PG, but there's another member that was a part of you that I didn't like. And so, no, bad person. Is what they think.
And that's easier than justifying than saying that they probably weren't worth staying with in the first place, and having to come to terms with that, which is really what it is.
Yeah.
Now, Cynthia, I know comedy is becoming a growing outlet for hearing bi and LGBTQ stories. Like, for me as a trans woman, I look to folks like Nori Reed and Robin Tran to find a little bit of identity, especially like intersectional identity, especially in a format that was historically where LGBTQ folks were the butt of the joke. How do you use comedy as a means of telling your own story? Do you put like bi out there, or is it something that is just like,
I don't put it out there. So I'm in the process right now of trying to be more personal with my comedy, because like I have if you take a bag and then you open the bag and then you look in the bag, there's like a bag full of traumas, and I'm trying to like now unzip them one by one and like tell those stories. And then at some point putting together in a joke material that, like just kind of show all the aspects of myself. Because fun fact, COVID before, I was a secret comedian. I did not tell my coworkers I was a comedian. It was someone leaked it and then it got out. But now I've actually realized that even that, having my worlds combined, it feels like another weight off my shoulder, right? I haven't got, like, there's some people at work that know that I'm bi, but not everyone. Some people know, maybe like one person knows that I'm like gender fluid, but not everyone. So I'm in the process of combining my worlds, but I'm doing it in a way where I'm taking it step by step, right? Because I'm trying to make sure that I stay mentally sane, that I do it in a safe space, and that I can kind of deal with the environmental potential repercussions or questions that come. In terms of comedy, I like to try and create a safe space for all my performers. So I just say no sexist, transphobic, racist, this jokes from the get-go. And then things still happen, and then I usually have a conversation with people afterward, or if I see something in another show, I'm like, you're just not coming onto my show. But what I do love with comedy is that, especially in the past 5 years, there's been an explosion of different stories that are coming out from different ethnicities, different perspectives. Even if you look at Tiffany Haddish had a show that came out, and she had like a few different women. She had a male or a male identifying person, but they did a lot of drag, and all these different stories coming out. And I think comedy's been the perfect outlet. And I've been seeing that even more now, because the bar, like, instead of having like a place and you have to have all this equipment, now all you need is like a Zoom account. Right. So I've been seeing a lot more women producers. Before, I only knew like 2 or 3 women producers. Now I know at least 5, 5 to 6 that are on virtually running rooms and telling their stories. So yeah, I'm seeing a lot more LGBTQ stories, but unfortunately, I'm going to wrap up and just say that unfortunately, comedy still reflects the current psyche, which means that it still reflects a lot of the internalized homophobia and anti-bi and, like all those things. So you still see that in like normal rooms, unfortunately, and you still kind of have to deal with those jokes, but it's progressing. But I also think that it's also a shift of people creating their own spaces that's helping that progression.
Yeah, and I love how you mentioned how being in this environment has allowed us to create actual spaces using like just a Zoom account to create like, events like this one, right? Theresa, you came a very interesting time. You came in March 2020, right during shelter in place. It's a very interesting time. I'm not sure if you have like a
shelter in place.
Yeah. So coming from Berlin and seeing what it's like to live in the States, how has your experience been in terms of just finding community here within the South Bay, either LGBTQ or bi?
Yeah, so thankfully here in the South Bay, people are actually doing online meetings and all that. So I was able to join the wonderful Bi Plus South Bay community. So if anybody watching doesn't know that community yet, but wants to find it, you can just search for it on Meetup, I believe. So that community is awesome. And then the broader like local South Bay community was also like really welcoming. As I also said before, I had good experiences, even in lesbian dominated spaces, which is kind of a new thing for me. So in Berlin, it was kind of, I felt like they were a little more, I don't know, distant in some ways, right? But then also Berlin is a huge city, and then the South Bay community is just smaller. So maybe that is a big difference. And then of course, now everything is online, and back in Berlin, I went to in-person meetings. So I guess everywhere there's like bi communities that are kind of trying to create community, trying to just connect with each other. So there's actually a lot of similarities, and I believe maybe there's more differences between like South Bay and San Francisco, for example, than there is generally between the US and Germany, or like it's really hard to say.
Yeah. Well, what's cool about this space that we have right here is that we have a very queer audience that's listening. How can the queer or allied communities that's listening today, and the millions that this is going to broadcast to right after we close up, what can they do to stand up against bi erasure or advocate for bi visibility? Do you folks have any thoughts?
Yeah, so if somebody makes a heteronormative or monosexual assumption, challenge them. For example, if somebody says, oh, she's with a woman now, so she's a lesbian. Well, maybe she isn't, right? Maybe she's bi. Or if people bring up those bisexual stereotypes, you could say, hey, that's not necessarily true, but even if it is, why is that a bad thing, right? Like challenge those ideas. And then if people just talk about gay and straight, you can also bring up the possibility of being bi.
Very good. And with Bi Visibility Day happening today, are there any folks that you would want to celebrate being this momentous day? Who in the bi community or even the queer community would you want to lift up, or who do you actually follow? Because I know within my trans and queer community, there's so many folks I follow in terms of finding inspiration. Are there folks that you folks follow in terms of bi inspiration?
Are you talking about giving shout outs? Is that what we're doing? Because
Yeah.
yeah. Okay,
Okay,
I would like to shout out my friend Elisa Lindquist, also bisexual. She also a female scientist, very boss, very cool, very great. I also followed them on Instagram. They actually, so it's THEM, but they're actually a publication, and they have been really good about writing intersectional stories, bisexual stories, transgender stories, non-binary stories. I actually do a lot of my learning from them. Still learning and absorbing, but they've been really great. And on Facebook, I joined Ambi's social community, and they're really, it's just funny. Most of it is just memes, but I think it actually, joining them maybe about a year or a year and a half ago, kind of made me come more into my bisexual identity, because it's just little things that you don't think of that are like, that you're like, oh, it's just me. And then you're like, oh no, all these other bisexual people have the same crushes or these same ideas or the same thing. It's like, oh, I'm in a community. Okay, go Facebook. All right. You still suck, but go Facebook for that group. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend following them and then joining the Ambi social community.
cool. Does anybody else have any other follows or mentions or recommendations for folks that want to learn more about the bi community, or who do you follow? No other recommendations.
No, I'm thinking, does anyone else have anyone?
Should have had poets.
Are we talking about shout outs again?
We're doing shout outs, yeah. Let's see. So not himself bi, he's gay, but JP Brammer and his Ola Pappy column and is really, really good and gets into a lot of issues with, it's an advice column, right? And it gets into a lot of issues around gender and sexuality and heritage and orientation, all these sorts of other things. And he handles the questions from a very diverse set of askers. And I think he does a very good job of it. So I would recommend checking him out. And then, oh gosh, who else is there? I'm blanking.
Yeah, I would like to recommend my favorite bi activist, Chiri Eisner. She has written a book called Bi Notes for a Bisexual Revolution. So if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it.
Awesome.
Oh, I almost forgot. Oh, go ahead, Jarvis.
Oh, I was going to say I was trying to think of queer poets, but most of the queer poets I know are either gay or lesbian. It's making me be like, I need to up my reading list and find more. But I do really enjoy the Queer Poets Anthology. I think it's the Queer Poets of Color Anthology, which has a slew of folks you can read and all of the sexualities they experience. But one who does come to mind is Brittany Rose Capri, who has a chat book called Black Queer Hoe, where she does kind of navigate this the sexuality of being. I'm not entirely sure if she's being bi plus, and so and where she kind of falls into that. And so it's a really great read. I recommend picking it up.
Awesome.
Yeah. I was just going to recommend following at San Jose Strong. So they are a local community activist and community involvement group, but they do have a branch. Like it has like a lot of different branches. And they do have a branch that works with San Jose Strong. What's up? Sarah already ahead of us. Hey, go Sarah, go Sarah, go Sarah, go Sarah, go Sarah, go Sarah. It was actually a suggestion that I had to Lana, the one that actually does the shirts. They're donating the proceeds from that shirt to the TGI Justice Initiative, which I recommended to them because they do a lot of great work in terms of like prison reform and castration, and also helping transgender, variant, and intersex folks with just getting them set up with whatever they need in life, and it's just great. It's just I love that. And funny enough, they were also covered by them, but I learned about them before. I'm a hipster. I'm kidding. I'm not a hipster. But yeah, follow San Jose Strong. I'm probably going to be the host to the queer prom they're throwing in November, which is one of the San Jose Strong. Yeah. So I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna say, "Hey, you're cutting the rug, Mrs. Jarvis. Go, Jarvis. Go." I don't know. I don't know how that works, but it's gonna be fun. So if you're interested in getting involved in the local San Jose community, and they do have an LGBTQ branch where they do community work related to that, follow San Jose Strong on Instagram.
Yeah, and there's so many amazing groups again, and I just want to reiterate the socio-political climate that we're in. So there's a lot of groups like San Jose Strong, like Hero Tent, like Black Outreach, like Solution. There's so many groups out there that are coming up. So get involved. We all know, I don't have to say go out there and vote. I don't have to say go out and take the census, but I do want to say get involved. Like these wonderful panelists today for Bi Plus Awareness Day. So I want to thank Jarvis, Cynthia, Richard, and Theresa for joining us today. Thank you for all your recommendations. But before we leave today, the one thing I want to do is ask each and everywhere, where can we follow you at? So Jarvis, where can we follow you at?
I'm on the social medias. I'm on Instagram. There I am. Look at me. Words _ facial hair. 2 underscores. And then I'm on Twitter at Jarvis D Subia. I got fire tweets, so follow me.
Hey, thank you, Jarvis. Let's see how fast Solly is. Cynthia, where can you follow you at?
Well, Cynthia in Public on Facebook, Cynthia in Public on Instagram. It's very easy. That's also my Venmo. I'm not kidding. Not kidding. Not kidding. I promise whatever you send me, I'll donate to the TGI Justice Initiative, just like last time. But yeah, so it's Cynthia in Public, very easy. I would love to get to know you. You can send me a message like, I saw you on Bi Awareness Day. I'll be like,
Richard, where can we follow you at?
You can find me on Twitter, RF_Mehlinger, on Facebook. Just Google my name. And you will mostly see me complaining about our tire fire politics. But yeah, if you want very long rants about housing policy, you know where to find them.
Very good. And Theresa, last but not least, where can we find you on the socials?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter as Theresa, and then Mastodon, that's a decentralized social network. So there's different like servers people can join, and I'm on a server called Cyberspace, and there I'm also Theresa. So if you don't know Mastodon yet, check it out. It's really queer.
Mastodon. I love it. All right. Well, happy Bi Awareness Day and Bi Visibility to each and every one of you. Thank you, Billy DeFrank Center. Thank you, Office of LGBTQ Affairs. And thank you, Saldi and Silicon Valley Pride and Luis for getting us on the TV for folks that still have a television. Thank you for getting us out there. If you want to follow me, I bet you Saldi doesn't have this here. If you want to follow me, I'm Peace Love Sera across all social. Stumped them. Again, thank you so much. If you want to find out a little bit more about Bi Visibility, please just Google it. Simple as that. And follow these amazing queer, bi plus, pan, like fluid people on this wonderful panel. Again, thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your evening and happy Bisexual Visibility Day.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Plus.